welcome to my channel. My name's John and I'm the Geeky Monk, and today I'm in the Derbyshire Dales and I've come to visit Eyam, best known as the Plague Village. So let's crack on and have some geeky facts. Eyam is an English village in the Derbyshire Dales that lies in the Peak District National Park. There is evidence of an early occupation by ancient Britons on the surrounding moors, and lead was mined in the area by the Romans. A settlement was founded on the present site by the Anglo-Saxons when mining was continued and other industries later developed. However, Eyam's main claim to fame is the story of how the village chose to go into isolation so as to prevent infection spreading after the Bubonic plague was discovered in 1665. Gonna have to be on my best behaviour today. So, the Bubonic plague, it's actually an infection of the lymphatic system, and it is generally caused by a flea bite. In the spring of 1665, it arrived in London and estimated it killed around 100,000 people in the city. But I think you may be asking, how did it end up in Eyam? Let's find out. In August 1665, George Vickers, who was a tailor's assistant, had received a parcel from London. Within this parcel, there was a bale of cloth. Now, he hung out the bale to dry. Unfortunately though, within this bale contained the fleas that were carrying the plague. George did become the first victim. Now, all these cottages along here are actually known as the plague cottages, and they all have plaques outside of the people who sadly passed away within each of the households. But we'll go and take a look at the one where George was living, just because he was the first victim. Now, the plaque states, Mary Hadfield, formerly Cooper, lived here with her two sons, Edward and Jonathan, her new husband Alexander Hadfield, and an employee known as George Vickers, who we just discussed. George Vickers, of course, was the first victim. He died on the 7th of September 1665. Edward Cooper, who was aged 4, passed away on the 22nd of September 1665. Jonathan, aged 12, died on the 2nd of October 1665, and Alexander passed away on the 3rd of August 1666. Mary was the only survivor. Now you can imagine the difficulty Mary would have had and other people within the village who were affected by this, and I am going to be going into more detail about what was brought in and what measures afterwards. But we're going to go and visit the church next, because there is something in there I want to show you which is actually not related to the plague. So let's go and take a look. This is St Lawrence Church. The current building dates back to the 14th century, but there is also some evidence of a previous church within the current building. I think there's a Norman window and some of the foundations still remained. But I want to show you something that dates back to Eyam's Anglo-Saxon past. As you can see, it's a Celtic cross. Now, it dates from the 8th century and is of Mercia style. So that would have been the kingdom that this area would have been included in. It actually wasn't originally placed here. I think it got moved here. I'm not 100% sure, so anyone that does know, please leave any comments or tell me. That would be fantastic. But yeah, it's a beautiful looking church. Now there's a few plaques and stones here that of quite interest in regards to what we're going to go through first of all, but I'll just show you them anyway. Again, I will apologise if you hear me sniffling or coughing a bit. I have got a little bit of a cold at the moment. Now this first plaque here is for Reverend Thomas Stanley. Again, it's a name you might not be familiar with at the moment, but I will be going through that with you in a moment. There's also another one here as well. And this is of Catherine Mon Peston. Now she was sadly a victim to the plague as well. But there's one more stone over here which I found really interesting and quite a bit eerie as well. But let's go and take a look. Now I'm filming this and it has cleared a bit, but it was quite a bit misty before, which I'm sure you saw in an earlier scene, and that definitely added to the eeriness of this subject we're discussing today. Oh dear. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to discuss the people that were involved with bringing this whole area into an isolation period and what effect it had on the people within the local community. Between September and December 1665, 42 more people sadly lost their lives, and not surprisingly, a lot of the villagers were considering fleeing. William Monpenson, who was the newly appointed rector of the village, decided that it was his duty to stop the plague from spreading. He decided that the best option would be for the village to go into quarantine. Of course, this would have been a hard enough challenge on its own, convincing the villagers of this. But Monpenson was deeply unpopular, and this was due to him replacing the previous rector, Thomas Stanley. In 1664, Stanley, who had refused to acknowledge the act of uniformity, had been kicked out of the rector. Monpenson, understanding his deep unpopularity and needing to get the villagers on side, reached out to Stanley. Stanley accepted. They met, discussed, and came up with a plan. On the 24th of June 1666, Monpenson and Stanley met with the villagers. They outlined their plan, and it was to isolate themselves from anybody else, not letting anyone come in and out of the village. Monpenson, who stated he would sacrifice his life, also committed to helping each and every one of the villagers as much as he could do. Stanley agreed, and it was actually his idea to isolate the whole village. The Earl of Devonshire, who lived close by in Chatsworth, said he would offer supplies and food to all the villagers if they agreed. The villagers, obviously terrified with the idea, did eventually agree, and the village went into a lockdown. This is Crooklet Delph, which later became Crooklet Church. Now the villagers would meet here on a Sunday and it would be used as the church. It was part of the measurements brought in, and the reason for it is that everyone could get together but be able to socially distance. Sounds familiar to them COVID days. Also part of the measurements were that if anyone in the family was to be infected, the whole family would isolate, and if any of the members of the family passed away from the plague, the family would have to bury their own dead. So let's go and take a look inside it. Now it is very muddy, and as you can see, very slippy, so this could be a little bit challenging, but I'm up for a challenge, so let's go, let's crack on. I'm not sure you can hear the church bells in the background as well, but very, very peaceful. So, as part of the other part of the measurements, and as discussed before, the early Derbyshires said that he would supply food and other goods to the village. But with the village going into isolation, they put off sections of the villages where they would do meeting points. And that's what I'm going to go and visit next. As I've just walked from that previous location, the sun's decided to come out and it's absolutely stunning. So spring is certainly on its way. Now, I'm in front of one of the boundary markers and people weren't allowed to go past this point or enter beyond this point. And this is where they would leave food and goods and exchange money. So let's just take a look. Now, as you can see, it's very, very slippy here. So if you just bear with me one moment, just whilst I get my foot in. Now, you can probably see them drill holes that were put into it. Now, what would happen is they would fill them with vinegar, and all the money that would be in exchange would be soaked in the vinegar first before either the person taking the money or going back into the village. So I'm just going to go ahead onto our next location. So let's see what else we can discover. Welcome to Riley's graves. Now, these graves are of one single family called the Hancock family, and they all died in the space of 6 days from each other. Let's take a look. So sadly, these guys were all victims of the plague. I'm going to head up the hill a bit further up and we'll go to our next location. And I'm here at my final location for the day. This is called Mon Peston's well. Now, it's not actually a well, it's actually a stream that runs through it. And it was originally used for, well, dig out so it could water pack horses. But when the outbreak started, Mon Peston made this one of the points where people would exchange coins and goods. And in that section of the well, he actually filled it with vinegar as well as water, so they would be able to wash the coins off, like I explained to you at the last place. And I just wanted to have a quick check, and people still leave coins to this day and apparently make a wish. So the plague outbreak lasted for about 14 months and 273 victims are actually recorded in the church. So this has been today's video. What I would say is it's probably been one of my most enjoyable videos that I've made so far in regards to the history that's here, and not to do just with the plague. There was quite a few things that I didn't cover, which I discovered as walking around, and it's extremely well signposted. So what I would recommend is anyone that likes a good walk is to certainly come and visit. It's a beautiful part of the UK. Also, there's lots of hikes and walks and cafes and pubs, so definitely I would highly recommend coming to visit. So until next time, peace and love.